The mailman rang twice this week. It wasn't particularly unusual, I suppose, but what caught my attention was the third time. That third time, he stayed to make sure I was in. It all started on a Monday, just like any other Monday in my quiet suburban neighborhood. The trees were swaying gently in the spring breeze, and I was working from home as usual, tucked away in my little office nook by the front window. I've always enjoyed watching the world go by from that window. The neighborhood kids on their bikes, the elderly couple across the street taking their afternoon walks, and of course, Rick, our mailman of 15 years. Rick has been delivering mail in our neighborhood since I moved here. He's the kind of mailman you see in nostalgic movies, always wearing his blue uniform with pride, knowing everyone by name, and occasionally stopping to pet the neighborhood dogs. He's in his late 50s now, with salt and pepper hair that's more salt than pepper these days, and laugh lines that tell stories of a man who's found joy in his daily routine. I've always appreciated his consistency, his friendly wave, and how he carefully places packages to ensure they don't get wet if rain is in the forecast. On this particular Monday, I heard the familiar sound of Rick's mail truck pulling up to my curb. I wasn't expecting anything special, perhaps some bills, a magazine subscription, or those endless credit card offers that seem to multiply like rabbits. But when I heard the doorbell ring instead of the usual shuffle of mail through the slot, I knew something was different. Rick rarely rang the bell unless there was something requiring a signature or too big for the mailbox. I opened the door to find Rick holding a medium-sized package wrapped in brown paper with foreign stamps decorating the corner. "Special delivery from overseas," he said with a smile that seemed to suggest he knew this wasn't just any package. "Thought you might want this right away rather than sitting in your mailbox." The return address was from a small town in Italy, Verona, to be precise. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't received anything from Verona since my study abroad days nearly a decade ago. "Thanks, Rick," I said, taking the package with curiosity bubbling inside me. "This is unexpected." He nodded knowingly, as if he understood the power that unexpected mail can have on a person's day. "The good ones always are," he replied before heading back to his truck. I closed the door and examined the package more closely. The handwriting was unmistakable. It belonged to Sofia, my Italian host mother from when I studied in Verona. We had kept in touch through social media over the years, but physical mail between us had stopped long ago. I carefully unwrapped the package to find a handcrafted leather journal with my name embossed on the cover, along with a letter written on delicate stationery that smelled faintly of lemon and rosemary, the scent of Sofia's kitchen. The letter explained that she had found some old photographs of my time there and wanted to send them along with a journal for me to record my own memories. "Life moves too quickly," she wrote. "Sometimes we need to pause and remember the moments that shaped us." That evening, I spent hours looking through the photographs and writing in the journal, recalling details of my time in Italy that I had almost forgotten. I felt a wave of nostalgia and gratitude wash over me. It's amazing how a simple delivery can transport you across time and space, reconnecting you with parts of yourself that have been dormant. Tuesday passed without incident. I worked, I ate, I watched some forgettable show on Netflix, and went to bed thinking about those Italian memories that had been stirred up. Wednesday morning, however, brought Rick back to my door. This was unusual. We typically only get mail delivery once a day, and Rick had already delivered the regular mail to my mailbox earlier. Yet there he was at 3:30 in the afternoon, this time with a certified letter in hand. "Sorry to bother you twice in one day," he said, his expression more serious than usual. "This came in late, and it's certified, so you need to sign for it." He handed me the electronic signature pad while studying my face with a hint of concern. The letter was from a law firm I didn't recognize, and my stomach tightened with that universal reaction to unexpected legal correspondence, a mixture of curiosity and dread. Rick hesitated before turning to leave. "Everything okay?" he asked, breaking the usual professional barrier that mail carriers maintain. I nodded, not wanting to seem alarmed. "I'm sure it's fine," I said, though I wasn't convinced myself. He gave me a nod that seemed to say he wasn't convinced either. "Well, if you need anything, I'm around the neighborhood until 5, he offered before walking back to his truck. I closed the door and opened the letter immediately. It was from an estate attorney informing me that my estranged uncle, whom I hadn't seen in over 20 years, had passed away and surprisingly named me in his will. There was to be a reading of the will next week, and my presence was requested. I sat down on my entryway bench, letter in hand, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. My uncle and my father had fallen out before I was even a teenager, and family gatherings had always been carefully orchestrated to ensure they never crossed paths. Why would he name me in his will? We had no relationship to speak of, just a few childhood memories of a man who always brought the best Christmas presents and had a laugh that filled the room. The letter offered no clues, just formal legal language and a date and time for the will reading. I spent the rest of Wednesday evening calling my mother and sister, trying to piece together what this might mean, but they were equally confused by this unexpected development. Thursday morning arrived with gray skies and a forecast for rain. I was distracted during my morning work calls, my mind continuously drifting to thoughts of my uncle and the mysterious will. Around noon, the rain began to fall, softly at first, then with increasing intensity until it became a steady downpour that created a soothing background rhythm to my otherwise chaotic thoughts. At precisely 2:15 p.m., I heard Rick's mail truck again. This was now definitely unusual. 3 visits in 1 week, with 2 being special deliveries requiring my presence. I watched from my office window as Rick stepped out of his truck, hunched against the rain despite his standard-issue Postal Service rain gear. He was carrying something in his hand, but from my angle, I couldn't tell what it was. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to find Rick standing there, water dripping from his hat, holding what appeared to be a simple white envelope. "Third time this week," he said with an attempt at his usual cheerfulness, but I could tell something was different. Not typical for my route. He handed me the envelope, which had no postage, just my name written in blue ink. "This isn't official mail," he explained, seeming almost apologetic. "It was given to me personally to deliver to you." I looked at him questioningly as I took the envelope. "By whom?" I asked, turning it over in my hands. Rick shifted his weight from one foot to another, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "A man approached me at the beginning of my route today. Said he was an old friend of yours and wanted to make sure you got this today." The rain continued to fall around us, and I noticed Rick was getting soaked despite the small overhang above my front door. "Would you like to come in for a minute?" I offered, stepping aside. "Get out of this rain?" To my surprise, Rick nodded and stepped inside, removing his wet hat as he did so. "I don't normally do this," he said, standing somewhat awkwardly in my entryway. "But I wanted to make sure you're okay. 3 special deliveries in 1 week, 2 of them unusual. It made me concerned." I appreciated his candor and the genuine worry in his eyes. "Let me get you a towel," I said, momentarily postponing the mystery of the envelope to attend to basic hospitality. When I returned with a towel, Rick had removed his rain jacket and was standing by the small table in my entryway, looking at a family photograph from years ago. "Is this your family?" he asked, gesturing to the picture. I nodded, handing him the towel. "From about 15 years ago, before my dad passed." Rick dried his face and hands, then pointed to the man standing at the edge of the family group. "And this man, is this your uncle?" I was startled by his question. "Yes, that's him. My Uncle James." "How did you know?" Rick's expression turned serious as he handed the towel back to me. "Because he's the one who gave me that envelope this morning." The revelation hit me like a physical force. My uncle, who according to the law firm's letter was deceased, had apparently been very much alive this morning when he handed an envelope to my mailman. "That's impossible," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just received a letter yesterday saying he died." Rick shook his head slowly. "I've been delivering mail for over 30 years, and I've never forgotten a face. The man who gave me that envelope is the same man in your photo. He seemed anxious, insisted I deliver it personally, and asked me to make sure you were home when I did." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and a small key. The note read, "The lawyers think I'm dead because that's what I wanted them to think. I need your help. Trust no one. Use this key at storage unit number 247 at West Side Storage. Come alone. I'll explain everything. Uncle James." I looked up from the note to find Rick watching me with concern. "Is everything all right?" he asked, clearly aware that whatever was in the envelope had shaken me. I hesitated, unsure of how much to share with this man who was, despite our years of friendly waves and brief exchanges, essentially a stranger. Yet something about his presence felt reassuring, a constant in my life during a moment when everything else seemed to be shifting beneath my feet. My uncle is apparently not dead, I said finally, deciding that the bare truth was necessary at this point. And he wants me to meet him. Rick's eyebrows rose in surprise. That's unusual, he said, in what must have been the understatement of the year. Do you think it's safe? Meeting him, I mean. It was a good question, one I hadn't even had time to consider in the shock of the moment. Was it safe? I barely knew this man who shared my blood. The uncle I remembered from childhood had been kind and generous, but people change over 20 years. And people who fake their own deaths and send cryptic messages through mailmen might not have the best intentions. I don't know, I admitted, but I feel like I need to find out what's going on. Rick nodded slowly, seeming to process this along with me. I understand curiosity, he said, but in my years of delivering mail, I've seen all sorts of situations. People in trouble, people hiding, people running from something or someone. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Just promise me you'll be careful. Maybe tell someone where you're going, bring a friend. His concern touched me. It was strange to realize that this man who had been a peripheral figure in my daily life for 15 years actually cared about my well-being. I will, I promised. Thank you for bringing this to me, and for staying to make sure I was okay. Rick smiled, a warm, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. That's what neighbors do, he said simply. We look out for each other. As he put his rain jacket back on and prepared to leave, I was struck by how this ordinary day had transformed into something extraordinary. How the simple act of delivering mail had created a connection between two people who had existed in parallel for years without truly seeing each other. Rick, I said as he reached for the doorknob, would you like to know what happens? When I go to the storage unit, I mean. He turned back, surprise evident on his face. I would actually. I've been delivering mail to this neighborhood for a long time, but this is definitely a first for me. I smiled, feeling a strange sense of camaraderie with him. Maybe I could let you know next time you're on your route? Or, I hesitated, then continued. I have your number from the Postal Service contact card. Would it be okay if I called you after? Rick seemed to consider this for a moment, then nodded. I'd appreciate that, just to know you're safe, if nothing else. He opened the door to find that the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle. Good luck with your uncle, he said. I hope whatever is going on, it turns out all right. After Rick left, I sat in my living room with the key in my hand, contemplating what to do next. The storage facility wasn't far, maybe a 15-minute drive. I could go now, before I lost my nerve. But Rick's words of caution echoed in my mind. I decided to call my sister, tell her where I was going, and ask her to expect a call from me within the hour. Safety first, as our mother always said. The drive to West Side Storage was tense, my mind racing with possibilities. What could be so important that my uncle would fake his own death? Was he in some kind of trouble? Was I walking into danger? The facility itself was ordinary, rows of identical metal units with orange doors, surrounded by a chain-link fence with keypad entry. I used the code from the website and drove slowly through the rows until I found Unit 247. It was at the back of the facility, partially hidden by a large oak tree that cast dappled shadows across the orange door. I parked, took a deep breath, and approached with the key in hand. There was no sign of anyone else around, just the distant sound of traffic and the occasional bird call. The key fit perfectly, and with a turn and a pull, the door rolled upward to reveal boxes. Ordinary cardboard boxes, stacked neatly and labeled with years. No uncle in hiding, no dramatic revelation, just what appeared to be someone's carefully organized storage. I stepped inside cautiously, scanning for any sign of my uncle or an explanation. On a small folding table in the corner was an envelope with my name on it, the same handwriting as the note Rick had delivered. Inside was a letter, several pages long, explaining everything. My uncle had not faked his death. He was indeed dying, of pancreatic cancer with only months to live. He had approached Rick that morning, knowing that the legal notification would have already arrived, because he wanted to ensure I would come to this storage unit. The boxes contained family heirlooms, photographs, and documents that told a story I had never known. About a family feud based on misunderstandings and pride. About my father and uncle's broken relationship that both had wanted to repair, but neither knew how. About my uncle watching my life from a distance through social media and mutual friends, proud of who I had become, but too ashamed of his absence to reach out directly. He had named me in his will, because he wanted these family treasures to go to someone who might appreciate their history. He had arranged this elaborate delivery because he wasn't sure I would come to the will reading, given our lack of relationship, and he wanted to explain himself before it was too late. At the end of the letter was an address, a hospice facility not far from my home, and a simple request. If you're willing, I'd like to meet you properly, at least once before I go. I sat on the concrete floor of that storage unit for a long time, surrounded by boxes containing my family's history, reading and rereading the letter until tears blurred the words. When I finally left, I drove straight to the hospice facility, where I found my uncle, thinner and frielier than in my memories, but with the same kind eyes I remembered from childhood. Our conversation that day lasted hours, filling in the gaps of 20 years of separation, healing wounds I hadn't even known I carried. I visited him every day after that for the 2 months he had left, sometimes bringing old photo albums from the storage unit for us to look through together, sometimes just sitting quietly while he slept. The day after my uncle's actual funeral, Rick rang my doorbell again. He wasn't in uniform. It was his day off, but he had come to check on me, having heard about the funeral through the neighborhood grapevine. I invited him in for coffee, and I told him the whole story, about the storage unit, the family history, the reconciliation that his simple act of mail delivery had made possible. You know, Rick said thoughtfully, cradling his coffee mug. In 30 years of delivering mail, I've been part of thousands of stories without ever knowing it. Birthday cards, college acceptance letters, wedding invitations, condolences, all passing through my hands without me knowing their impact. He smiled softly. It's nice, for once, to know how the story ends. Since that day, Rick and I have developed a friendship that goes beyond the casual wave of mailman and resident. He comes for dinner once a month, and I've met his wife and grown children. We talk about books and travel and the changing neighborhood. And sometimes, we talk about my uncle and how a series of mail deliveries brought unexpected healing to my family. It's strange how the most mundane aspects of our lives, like mail delivery, can sometimes be the conduit for profound change. How the people we see every day without really seeing can become important figures in our personal narratives. And how sometimes it takes a mailman ringing 3 times in 1 week to deliver not just mail, but a new understanding of family, connection, and the unexpected ways that healing can find us. Total _char_count, 14,085.